Chapter 30. Into the Depths Again, Part 1. The oppressive air of the resistance base seemed to cling to them as they descended into the damp, labyrinthine sewers beneath Atraxia. The entrance was a narrow, rusted grate hidden in the farthest corner of the base, and it groaned in protest as John pried it open. A waft of stale, putrid air hit them, thick with the stench of decay and damp earth. Lucas hesitated at the edge, his hands trembling slightly, though he quickly hid them in his pockets. Erika caught the motion, her tendril-like hair flickering with subtle unease, but said nothing. The resistance leader, grim-faced, stood by with two soldiers, watching as the group disappeared into the shadows below. John led the way, his leather hat tilted low, the map clutched tightly in his gloved hand. His eyes darted from the faded parchment to the dank walls around them, searching for familiar markers. Behind him, Erika followed, her boots splashing softly through the shallow muck. She kept a wary eye on Lucas, who lagged slightly, his expression distant. The soldiers brought up the rear, their rifles held close, their nerves taut. "We shouldn't have to go this deep," Erika muttered, her voice low but sharp. "We're too exposed. The patrols—" "Ain't got a choice," John interrupted, not bothering to look back. "The resistance says this is the safest way to the outer sectors. Unless you want to waltz through the main gates and straight into the Empire's arms, this is it." Erika scowled, her fiery nature barely contained. "What I'm saying is we could have waited. Lucas isn't stable." Her voice dropped even lower, though it carried enough weight to slice through the tension. "You've seen him. He's barely keeping it together." "I'm fine," Lucas said suddenly, though his tone was anything but convincing. He didn't meet their eyes, staring instead at the glistening brickwork of the tunnel. The faint glow of moss illuminated his pale face, the shadows under his eyes etched deep. "Just keep moving." John cast him a sidelong glance, but said nothing. He'd seen men crumble under less pressure, and Lucas had endured more than anyone should. Yet the boy's silence unnerved him. Lucas had always been quiet, but this was different. The group pressed forward, the sound of their footsteps echoing ominously through the tunnels. Water dripped from unseen cracks, creating a rhythmic, almost taunting beat. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, their fingers twitching near their triggers. Every corner they turned felt like it could lead to an ambush, every shadow a potential enemy. The Empire's reach extended even into these forgotten depths. Erika's patience finally snapped. "This isn't working," she hissed, stepping closer to John. "We're moving too slow. If they find us down here, we're trapped." "You think I don't know that?" John shot back, his voice low but edged with frustration. "The map's old. Half these paths weren't even marked. You want to lead us straight into an Imperial patrol? Be my guest." "Stop it," Lucas muttered, so softly they almost didn't hear him. When neither responded, he spoke again, louder this time, his voice strained. "Just stop. Arguing isn't going to help." Erika turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "Lucas, we're trying to keep you safe. You don't have to." "I know what you're trying to do," he interrupted, his tone sharper than intended. He winced, running a hand through his hair. I'm fine. Let's just keep moving." John gave Erika a warning look, one that said, "Let it go." Reluctantly, she fell silent, though the tension between them remained palpable. As they delved deeper, the tunnels grew narrower, the air heavier. Lucas's breathing quickened, his footsteps faltering. His mind was a storm of fragmented memories, flashes of cold, sterile laboratories, and the suffocating weight of the Empire's experiments. The walls seemed to close in around him, the faint hum of machinery from above resonating in his skull like a cruel echo of the past. "Lucas?" Erika's voice pulled him back, and he realized he'd stopped walking. Her tendril-like hair moved gently, a faint glow emanating from the tips as if sensing his distress. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I'm fine." But Erika didn't look convinced. "We can rest if you need to," she offered, her tone softer now. "We're not stopping," John interjected, his voice firm. "Not until we're out of these tunnels." Erika shot him a glare but didn't argue. Instead, she fell in step beside Lucas, her presence a silent reassurance. The soldiers ahead suddenly raised their hands, signaling the group to halt. John moved forward cautiously, peering into the darkness ahead. "What is it?" Erika whispered. "Could be nothing," John replied, though his hand rested on the hilt of his blade. "Or it could be company. Stay sharp." The tension was suffocating as they waited, every second dragging on like an eternity. The soldiers scanned the area, their movements precise and practiced. After a few moments, one of them waved the group forward, the signal clear. "False alarm," John muttered, though his grip on the map tightened. "Let's move." As they continued, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed to shift and writhe at the edges of his vision, and the faint whispers in his mind grew louder. He clenched his fists, focusing on the rhythm of his steps, the sound of water dripping, anything to drown out the noise. Erika noticed his unease. "Lucas, are you?" "I said I'm fine," he snapped, though his voice cracked slightly. He regretted it immediately, his guilt flashing across his face. I'm sorry. It's okay," Erika said gently. "We're almost there." John glanced back at them, his expression unreadable. He knew they couldn't afford any more delays, but he also knew Lucas was nearing his limit. They all were. The map led them to a larger chamber, where the faint light of the surface filtered through cracks in the ceiling. The Resistance's marker was etched into the wall, a small symbol barely visible beneath layers of grime. John exhaled in relief. "We're close," he said. "Another hour, maybe less, and we'll be out." Lucas nodded, though his mind remained clouded. The whispers had quieted, but they lingered, a reminder of the darkness he couldn't escape. As the group pressed on, he couldn't help but wonder if the true danger lay ahead, or within. The sewer network beneath Atraxia was a labyrinth of darkness, filth, and whispered memories. The air was heavy with the damp stench of decay, the walls slick with moisture and grime. The faint trickle of water echoed eerily in the narrow passages, broken only by the hushed voices and careful steps of the group. Lucas, Erika, John, and 2 resistance soldiers moved cautiously, their lanterns casting faint, flickering light that seemed to reveal more shadows than clarity. Lucas's half-steps faltered as the oppressive atmosphere seemed to close in around him. The smell, the darkness, the sense of being buried alive, all of it clawed at the edges of his mind. A distant, vivid memory stirred, one he had long tried to bury. Monstrous forms clawing through ancient stone, shrieks of pain, the roar of collapsing tunnels. His breath quickened, and the faint hum of his latent powers began to vibrate in the air. "Are you all right?" Erika's voice cut through the gloom, sharp with concern. Her tendril-like hair glowed faintly, a warm light in the suffocating dark. Lucas turned to her, his face pale and strained. "I hate sewers," he muttered, his voice trembling. He tried to press on, but his hands shook as he gripped the straps of his pack. John noticed Lucas's unease and stepped closer, his calm, steady presence a stark contrast to the storm brewing within the younger man. "Keep it together," he said quietly. "Focus on what's ahead, not what's behind." But it was too late. The memory surged forward with violent intensity, consuming Lucas in a wave of sensory overload. In his mind's eye, he was no longer in the sewers of Atraxia, but deep within a dwarven city. He saw monsters, twisted, grotesque creatures, tearing through stone and flesh alike. The sounds of screams and breaking stone reverberated through his skull. He could feel the heat of the flames, the suffocating press of debris, the overwhelming sense of helplessness. He stopped abruptly, his knees buckling. The lantern's light dimmed as a wave of energy rippled outward from him, distorting the air like heat rising from a fire. "Lucas?" Erika stepped toward him, alarmed. "I hate sewers!" Lucas screamed, his voice echoing through the tunnels. A blinding burst of light erupted from him, illuminating the sewer network in stark, surreal detail. The walls' filth glistened like polished obsidian, and the group was momentarily blinded by the brilliance. When the light faded, Lucas collapsed. His body crumpled to the damp floor, lifeless but for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. John caught him just before his head hit the ground, lowering him gently. "Damn it," he muttered, checking Lucas's pulse, and then his eyes, which fluttered but didn't open. "He's out cold." Erika's face twisted in frustration and concern. "We're sitting ducks down here if he does that again. We need to restrain him, at least until we're out of these tunnels." John's head snapped up, his glare cutting through the dim light. "Absolutely not. He's already fighting his own demons. Restraining him will only make it worse. And letting him explode like a human lantern is a better idea?" Erika's tone was sharp, her tendril hair writhing as if reflecting her agitation. "We're in Imperial territory, John. One more burst like that, and they'll know exactly where we are. The resistance soldiers shifted uneasily, glancing between their leaders. The younger of the two, a woman with a patch over one eye, cleared her throat. We're burning time. If the Imperials don't find us, the patrols might. We should move, now. John nodded, his jaw tight. We carry him, no restraints. Erika hesitated, then sighed. Fine, but if he flares up again, I'm not apologizing. Together, they hoisted Lucas, his unconscious form a dead weight. John took most of the burden, his strength steady and unyielding despite the damp chill that seemed to seep into his very bones. Erika led the way, her hair casting faint glimmers of light ahead, while the soldiers brought up the rear, their weapons drawn and their eyes darting nervously at every sound. The group moved in silence, the only sounds the shuffle of boots against wet stone and the occasional drip of water echoing through the tunnels. The oppressive darkness pressed closer, amplifying every creak, every distant scurry of unseen vermin. John kept his focus on the path ahead, but his mind churned with concern for Lucas. Whatever the boy had seen, it had shaken him to his core. Erika glanced back occasionally, her expression softening as she saw the strain in John's face. Despite their differences, she respected his resolve. He'd always been steady, even when the world seemed to crumble around them. She only hoped his faith in Lucas wasn't misplaced. Hours seemed to pass as they trudged through the labyrinthine sewers, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, they reached a wider chamber, where a rusted grate allowed a faint, grimy shaft of light to filter down from the city above. The group paused, catching their breath. "How much farther?" the one-eyed soldier asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Erika checked the map their resistance contact had provided. Another 2 sectors, maybe 3. The base should be just beyond the next junction. John adjusted Lucas's weight, his back aching but his determination unbroken. Then let's keep moving. The sooner we're out of here, the better. As they set off again, Lucas stirred faintly in his arms, a low groan escaping his lips. John glanced down, relieved to see some sign of life. "Hang in there, kid," he murmured. Lucas' eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, glassy and unfocused. "The monsters," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. They're still there, in the dark." "What monsters?" John asked quietly, but Lucas had already slipped back into unconsciousness. Erika's tendrils twitched nervously. "Whatever he's seeing, it's not just memories. Something's haunting him, and it's strong enough to affect all of us." "We'll deal with it when we're safe," John replied firmly. But even as he said it, a nagging doubt gnawed at him. Lucas's outburst had been no ordinary flashback. Something deeper, darker, and more dangerous was at play, and it was only a matter of time before it surfaced again. The oppressive chill of the tunnels crept into every corner, amplified by the damp air and the occasional echo of dripping water. The group trudged forward, their progress measured and deliberate. The dim bioluminescent fungi on the walls barely provided enough light to distinguish friend from foe, forcing John to rely heavily on his finely tuned instincts. Lucas remained unconscious, slung over the shoulders of one of the soldiers. His inert form seemed heavier than it should, a silent reminder of the immense burden their journey carried. Erika's frustration was palpable. Her tendril-like hair swayed with agitation, its fiery hues dimmed to a dull ember in the oppressive atmosphere. She walked just behind John, her hands clenched into fists. "We're moving too slowly," she hissed, her voice low but laced with irritation. John's response was measured, his tone calm but firm. "We can't afford to rush. These tunnels aren't just a shortcut. They're a death trap if we're not careful. The last thing we need is to trigger an alarm or walk into an ambush." Erika shot him a glare but said nothing more. The tension between them had been simmering since they entered the tunnels, a product of differing priorities and the weight of their mission. While John prioritized caution and survival, Erika's frustration stemmed from the knowledge that every moment they spent here put them closer to being discovered by Imperial forces. The 2 soldiers scouting ahead paused, their weapons held at the ready. One of them, a grizzled man named Doran, signaled for the group to halt. Erika's sharp eyes caught the faint motion, and she moved forward to see what had caused the delay. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of distant water trickling. Doran gestured to the tunnel ahead. noise. Could be machinery, or something else. Could be Imperial patrols, John said as he joined them. His eyes scanned the darkened path ahead, his expression unreadable. We'll proceed slowly, weapons ready. Erika nodded reluctantly, her frustration giving way to caution. She stepped back to let Doran and the other soldier, a younger woman named Mira, take the lead. The group moved forward again, their footsteps muffled against the damp ground. As they ventured deeper, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to tighten around them. The distant hum of what sounded like machinery grew louder, interspersed with faint, indiscernible echoes. It was impossible to tell if the sounds were natural or the product of Imperial presence. John's hand hovered near his weapon, and Erika's hair began to bristle with barely contained energy. "We're nearing an upper tunnel exit," Doran whispered over his shoulder. "The map showed it's close to one of the Imperial checkpoints. We'll need to decide if we're taking this route or doubling back to find another." John glanced at Erika, then at Lucas. The unconscious telepath hadn't stirred, his breathing shallow but steady. "If we go back, we waste hours. Erika, thoughts?" "We push forward," she replied without hesitation. "If there's an Imperial presence, we deal with it. But we're not wasting time." John nodded. "Doran, Mira, take point. Keep us updated." The two soldiers moved ahead, their silhouettes disappearing into the shadows. Erika and John followed, their steps silent but deliberate. The tension between them lingered, unspoken but tangible. Erika's frustration simmered beneath the surface, while John maintained his stoic demeanor, his focus entirely on their surroundings. The tunnel began to slope upward, the air growing marginally drier. The distant hum grew louder, accompanied by a faint vibration underfoot. Mira held up a hand, signaling for a stop. She crouched near a junction in the tunnel, peering into the dimly lit corridor that branched off to the left. "Movement," she whispered. "Can't tell if it's automated or manned." John joined her, his sharp eyes narrowing as he observed the faint shadows flickering against the walls. "Looks like a maintenance drone. No sign of patrols." Erika moved closer, her voice low but insistent. "Then we keep going. If it's just a drone, we can avoid detection." "Assuming it's not broadcasting our location," John replied. He motioned for the group to follow as he began to move cautiously through the junction. The faint hum grew louder, and the flickering light of the drone cast eerie shadows against the walls. The group pressed on, their movements synchronized and deliberate. The oppressive atmosphere of the tunnels weighed heavily on them, each step a reminder of the dangers lurking just beyond their perception. Erika's frustration began to shift into a focused determination, her senses attuned to every sound and movement around them. As they neared the upper exit, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. The faint glow of the drone's lights revealed rusted machinery and long-forgotten Imperial equipment. The hum of the drone echoed in the chamber, its movements precise and methodical as it navigated the space. John raised a hand, signaling for the group to halt. He scanned the chamber, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. Erika's hair bristled, her fiery tendrils glowing faintly as her emotions began to surface again. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "We wait," John replied. "Let it pass. No point risking an encounter if we don't have to." Erika frowned but nodded. The group waited in tense silence as the drone continued its movements, the hum of its machinery filling the chamber. Lucas remained motionless, his unconscious state a constant source of unease. Finally, the drone moved toward the far end of the chamber, its lights disappearing into another tunnel. John signaled for the group to move, his movements precise and deliberate. They crossed the chamber quickly, their footsteps muffled against the damp ground. As they reached the upper tunnel exit, the air grew cooler, and faint traces of light filtered in from above. The group paused, their collective relief palpable. The oppressive atmosphere of the tunnels began to ease, though the tension of their mission remained. John glanced at Erika, his expression unreadable. "We made it this far. Let's hope the next leg of the journey goes as smoothly." Erika's tendrils flickered with a faint glow as she nodded. "We'll make it. We have to." The group pressed on, their resolve unshaken despite the challenges ahead. The oppressive tunnels were behind them, but the dangers of their mission were far from over. With Lucas still unconscious and the Empire's presence looming ever closer, they knew that every step forward brought them closer to both their goal and the ever-present threat of discovery.